Today what I want to do is I want to go back to the practical exercise that I gave you at the end of our introductory class. I want to play with that because what it really is just sort of an example of how to think about Supreme Court cases. Because what you're really dealing with when we're reading these cases is hierarchy of the opinion. What's the most important piece and why? And how do we redefine that? Because they never say, this is the new right that we've defined and this is how it works. They always leave themselves an out. They always leave themselves an opportunity. So when we started, or when we ended class last week, I told you that I had 4 primary rules when I'm worried about working with my daughter. One is her safety. Another one is her time for sleep and health. Seems to be implied as part of that sleep analysis. I told you that I was also worried about her getting her homework done. And then I mentioned that I am concerned about her social development to some degree. I left you with those 4 rules, but I gave you no indication of which rule is the most important, which rule is the foundational rule. And our goal today from these 4 rules is to pick out the one that actually matters the most to me. So here's our first case, for want of a better word. So October 1st, she goes to a high school football game. It ends at 9:45 p.m. She joins some friends for pizza. She gets home at 11:15. My response is, I am not happy. Next time, do not go to the pizza parlor. You need your sleep and you've got plenty of homework to do. What rules are implicated in this particular scenario? This is where you interact with me telling me what you think. What rules are implicated?
The time for sleep and the homework.
So sleep and homework. So you see those 2 rules right away. Does anybody see any other rules besides sleep and homework? Yeah.
You could possibly get development, social development, just because before you addressed it, she was allowed, at the very least, to go out to the football game.
Well, what is a high school football game?
Social.
Is that social development? So she was allowed to engage in social development behaviors. Social development seems to be a value, yeah?
There's a tacit concern for safety. I mean, she's a high school student, so you're not going to come out and say maybe to not, you know, when we found her, like, I'm worried about your safety, because I'm sure she thinks of herself as an adult, but coming home at 11:15 p.m. can be considered a safety issue.
So tacit.
I would say it's a tacit, like it's an undercurrent in the scenario.
So you read safety into the facts.
Yes.
Did anybody else read safety into the facts? Would we all agree that safety is not explicitly mentioned anywhere there?
Yeah.
So then where does this concern for safety come from? You mentioned the fact that she's a high school student?
Well, it's sort of a common sense thing. She's a high school student, she's a young woman, she's in high school, so I'm assuming she's not 18, she's underage. 11:15 can be a dangerous time of night. There's more crime that happens at night, maybe driving home, she gets hit by a drunk driver or something else happens. It's more likely something can affect her safety if she's out and about at night.
That's all arguments for why you think safety is implied,
Yes.
but my question to you is, from whence did you get the idea of safety
Common sense.
as a value? So it doesn't come from the case.
Intuition.
It's intuition. It's a personal belief or societal belief that you're reading into the case.
Yes.
Okay, that's fair. John?
I'll make the argument that the only reason you would even imply safety is because you know that safety is one of the rules up there. If it was just those first 3, would you still be like, oh, it's also a safety issue? Probably not. So you're only reading into it because you know it could be a possible answer.
So you think safety might be implied, but you don't feel like safety is really the issue here.
Not the issue whatsoever.
What do you think the issue is?
I think I feel like the main 2 issues are homework and sleep, and that with a minor social development thrown in.
So you would, at least based upon this case, you would say that homework and sleep seem to be co-equal,
Yes.
and then social development is subordinate to homework and sleep,
Yes.
and safety, you're not willing to say one way or the other right now.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Yeah.
I agree with him, but I didn't get the safety issue until we went to scenario 2. And when she was home by 11, and you were okay with that it was like a curfew.
Well, so let's look at the second scenario. Another football game, which again ends at 9:45. She goes for pizza and she's home by 10:55. I seem fine. I don't talk about homework. I don't talk about getting sleep. I tell her if she hurries up, she can get in bed by 11:30. So, what does this case stand for? In the hierarchy of the 4 rules, what does this case mean? Yeah.
It seems like sleep is more important than homework, so now I would bump that up higher.
So you, at least in this case, getting to bed at a decent time seems to be the primary issue. Yeah.
But homework isn't mentioned of all things are equal.
It may be that homework wasn't an issue this time because there wasn't any, or it had already been done.
Friday.
What about safety? Does anybody see safety in this one?
I would say it seems that your safety concerns are met because she's within the curfew, which to me emphasizes the safety issue in the first one more. She's 15 minutes late if the curfew is 11 o'clock.
So you think the time, following the rules
Yeah.
procedurally to the time, seems to be an important,
Time is imperative here.
time is imperative. Yeah.
I don't know, I thought in scenario 1, when you said next time don't hang out at the pizza parlor, that kind of like triggered off safety because you said that for a reason, so maybe you didn't want to go in there because you know bad things happen.
Or maybe I didn't want her being around somebody who might be at the pizza parlor. That's possible too, yeah.
But also she's at the pizza parlor.
But she was at the pizza parlor this time and I didn't have any heartburn with it, John.
I feel like in the first one, the problem wasn't the pizza parlor, it's the fact that she got home. It's like you go to the football game, you go, oh, why you late? Oh, I was at the pizza parlor. Well, next time I'll take your black behind to the pizza parlor. Because that's your parents saying, don't be late. So that's what the sentence meant. It's the construction of the sentence, not the sentence in itself.
I'm so glad I have someone in class who could say black behind. You know, that's awesome.
Just cut it out of your video. You can
Yeah,
say as much as
that is awesome. We've got a couple of issues here that we don't know. We've got 11:15. Is it a time issue? We've got pizza. Is it a safety issue? Are safety and time connected with one another here? Does one have more value than the other? Or is time perhaps an artificial construct for safety? Such that while I can't always identify safety, time I can identify. And is time standing in for safety? These are some questions that, you know, we might want to think about asking, right? We get here when we got our second case. I can now compare 10:55 to 11:15. Apparently, my behavior towards my daughter changes somewhere between 10:55 p.m. and 11:15 p.m. when she comes home on a Friday night. Do you know whether the issue is safety, social construct, homework, or sleep at this point in time after 2 cases? I mean, you have intuitions of what you think it is. Some folks are saying safety. Some folks are just saying you do what I tell you to do when I do it. I brought you into this world. I could make another one just like you. You know, that thought process. Although why I would is beyond me, but I guess it's theoretically possible. So, let's look at the third case. During the week, okay, this is something new, right? We haven't had any week cases before. We've only had weekend cases. We've only had Friday night cases. We've got a volleyball game on Tuesday night, band performance on Friday night. 11. 11 seems to be an important number, doesn't it? So for the third time now, right around 11 o'clock has come, and I'm fine with all of this. So all of this behavior is okay under my 4 rules. On Saturday, she wants to go to an early movie. I say no, because she's been out twice. She had homework to catch up on, and I want her in bed at a reasonable time. Now, the movie's early, so we don't have a time issue. We don't have an 11 p.m. issue. So does this case tell us something that we didn't know before? John?
I thought this case emphasizes the fact that you only want to go out a couple times a week.
So it's the number of social interactions I'm comfortable with.
And then on top of that, you bring the homework issue again because you have homework to catch up on, which implies, I suppose, that because she went out twice, that she wasn't doing her homework or whatever, so you want to make sure that she does get it done.
Does it say anywhere in there that she wasn't doing it or that she just needed to get it done?
It says catch up.
Okay. But does that imply that she's done something wrong?
No, not necessarily.
Okay. Because the way you said it was like she was in trouble just because it hadn't been done. Yeah.
It implies that she's falling behind on it.
So you think that there's homework has risen in value as a rule because it hasn't been complied with in a timely fashion. Yeah, Drew.
This similar to scenario one seems to imply that the homework and the reasonable amount of sleep supersede the need for social development. So she's had some social development, but the homework and the sleep are now more important.
So is it a sliding scale where they're all surging back and forth together? Or is homework and sleep more important than social development?
It would seem so.
So you feel like social development is not as much of a concern to me as her being in bed when she's supposed to be in bed and her getting her homework done.
Yes.
So you'd be comfortable making social development number 3, if not number 4, underneath safety.
Yeah.
Is it you feel like you've got enough at this point to do that? Does everybody else, Boone?
Well, I would say homework also is above sleep based on this scenario because you mentioned that she has homework to catch up on and she needs to be in bed at a reasonable time. Well, that's implying that the homework needs to be done before bed. So she would be.
Well, I clearly don't want her up past 11 doing her homework, but we don't even know what time it is when she and I had this conversation, do we? We just know she wanted to go to an early movie, and I said no. You know, isn't that interesting? If time is our factor that's most important to us, we'd really like to be able to find time in this particular fact pattern, right? So that now we can tie it to the other 2 cases, but we don't have it, John.
I feel like this case also rebuts the fact that we feel like the time has to do with safety. Because this last time it's an early movie, he's like, no catch up on homework, nothing about like being safe.
Nothing about safety at all.
So, which I think makes, now you have to determine, now I feel like we pretty much pull out from this case that the curfew is 11 o'clock. Knowing that, the question behind the curfew is the curfew there for safety's sake or the curfew there to make sure she gets enough sleep? Like what is the reason behind the curfew?
And it could be both, right? It could be safety and sleep. We don't know, yeah.
Although nothing's happened yet compared to the other 2 past scenarios.
That's true. We haven't had any kind of misconduct on her part or the violation of a rule. This case just seems to be positing what's appropriate in predicting future behavior. Now that's an interesting observation, right? Because when a case is trying to deal with a factual issue that has not yet occurred, it becomes pretty difficult to extract a rule from it that's grounded solidly. I mean, we've got some thoughts about what it means, but we really don't know what's going on here. And that could be that this is one of these cases that's sort of defining the contours of the law, but doesn't really stand for anything. It's out there. It may later wind up to be an appendix of that particular area of the law. We just don't know. Let's look at the next one. Week of October 18th, she goes to a movie on Thursday evening and a dance on Friday night. Both times she returns by 11. When she gets home on Friday, I remind her that we're going to her uncle and aunt's 50th wedding anniversary on Saturday. She's surprised. She thought she would be expected to spend the rest of the weekend on her homework. So at least in the mind of Laura, homework is more important than social development, right? Okay. I tell her she probably should. Yeah, you're right, homework's important. But this is family, and we're going to an important event.
Why do you say she thinks homework's more important? She had social activity Thursday, Friday, and then also social family on Saturday. So I don't think homework is more important to her than, I mean, all of these have overarching social implications.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, I think that, like, the important part from this case is there are different kinds of social development. So there's family social development and there's like friend social development. And it seems
So-
like family might be more important.
Family might have a higher, is family a new rule or a subset of the social development rule?
I think it's a subset.
If it's a subset of the social development rule, we treat it like we would usually treat social development unless we have a certain set of circumstances that make it more important. You could maybe argue that the 50th anniversary pushes, in that particular set of circumstances, family social development, unlike other forms of social development, rises above homework and enough sleep even, perhaps. But we don't know. Or it could be that family social development is a completely different category. And this is just the first time we've seen it, So we don't know how important it is in comparison to the other rules. The way we interpret it as a subset of social development or as a separate rule would very much impact how we would predict future behavior, future cases, right? And if we get it right, we appear brilliant and we make sense in front of the court. If we get it wrong, perhaps we get in trouble. Let's look at scenario 5. She goes to school play and returns home by 10:30 on Wednesday. On Friday, she goes to a dance with a date. Oh, this is the first time she's had a date. It's the first time that word has been used. They return home by 10:45. While parked in the driveway, they talk in the car for a few minutes while I clean my shotgun on the porch. Double barrel 12 gauge. She came in the house at 11:15. The next day, she wants to go to her brother's first basketball game with some friends. There will be several more home games, and I'm not going to this one. Were her actions on Friday and her requests on Saturday consistent with my rules based upon the cases that you have already read? John?
So first interpretation is being at the house at 10:45 and not being in the house. Is that consistent with the curfew?
What do you guys think?
I'd say no, because like I think on scenario 2 is what it was. She was in at 10:55, and you had said you'll be if you hurry, you'll be in bed by 11:30. So it kind of implies that she needs a lot of time to get ready for bed. So if you're in at 11:15, you're not going to bed by 12, almost 12 o'clock.
So you think by coming in at 11:15, she's violated a curfew issue? Austin?
She was in the driveway on the property under your direct supervision.
I mean, I was watching.
Made.
I mean, there's not a safety concern, at least not for her. There's no safety concern. Yeah.
I would agree with Austin. I also want to add that the type of social development this is maybe enhances your leniency for the fact that, like, I mean, this is like a date is a big deal.
A date's a very big deal for a teenage. Well, it used to be a big deal before Tinder and Grindr and whatever app you guys are using this week.
Probably not on Grindr.
Well, I didn't say if it was a guy or a gal, so you know, and maybe my never mind. I'm not. I can't even walk down that path with a straight face.
The hypothetical, yeah. I think the fact that it's maybe a more important type of social situation, that you might be more leniency is my point.
So perhaps with oversight, I think it's important that this aspect of her social self become developed.
Yes.
And so maybe social development has multiple categories. But if we're saying that, we're reading the earlier case where I made social development with family more important, and we're positing that social development as an individual when it comes to the romantic health of her being is important to me as well. We're saying that social development may be a lot more important than we initially thought it was. I'm not necessarily disagreeing with you, but I mean, we're reading a lot into it to get to that point, yeah.
There's also an issue with whether the basketball game is family or like a friends thing, because it's her brother's game, so you could interpret that as like a family social development, but you're not going and she's going with friends.
So it ain't that big a deal, right?
I mean, I would probably say it's a friends social development, but you could argue the other way.
But if it is family, then, you know, maybe she should go to it. But I'm not going to it, so is it really family? Austin?
Well, I understand what Kelly's saying, but I think it kind of gets crossed out by the next sentence that this is just the first of several opportunities, and it's not a one-off event like the wedding anniversary.
Like the 50th. So we could differentiate it based upon the factual differences. And say to, I don't know, an appellate court or a boss who's asking us how this case is going to apply, you know, while family seems to be an important issue in the Rose household, previously there were these factors: 50th wedding anniversary, first time, a one-time event that was more important than safety, sleep, and homework. And now this one, which is an event that's going to occur with repetition, that is not sufficiently important for the patriarch or the family to even attend. And so we would we'd tease those factors out, and then we'd say to the boss, you know, Mr. District Attorney who's getting ready to prosecute Ms. Rose, in this particular set of circumstances, her wanting to go to that basketball game is probably not going to be important enough to allow her to actually go. for the following reasons. That thought process is exactly what you do in criminal procedure from a constitutional law perspective. You know, you look at the cases that have defined the rules, you take the new scenario where you're not sure one way or the other, you line them up, and then you make a judgment call. And then you make the best argument that you can, both to the court, to your boss, whether you think this is a subset of social development or otherwise. What's interesting for me as the professor is that if you identify over the course of this semester, the black letter law from the cases as they currently exist, where you jump off in your application of the black letter law, at a certain level, I don't care. I care in that I get to see a legal mind at work and see how facile you can be with your argument, and that's an important skill to have. But from a pass the bar perspective, understanding the black letter law as it currently exists and being able to posit it correctly in an essay format or choose it properly out of a multiple choice question, that's the fundamental skill that you have to have in the very near future. So when I'm grading it, I look first for identification of the proper legal standard. And then the application of the legal standard smart minds can disagree. And it just becomes a question of how well you make the argument that you've chosen to make and whether your argument makes sense. We go back to this one. I'm really intrigued by the idea of, is family a separate rule that hasn't appeared before? Or is it a subset of social development that gets treated in a particular fashion? To have identified that idea and talked about it, that's a good legal mind at work. Which way you go? You know, smart people can disagree. But finding that fine piece and saying, hey, look at this could go one way or this could go the other, that's superior analysis. Because what you're looking for are the cracks where the facts could drop either way. That's really what you're looking for. And because it's in those cracks that lawyers flip cases for their clients one way or the other, and lawyers make a lot of money. Is it hot in here? Or is it just me? Just me? Okay, good. Because I've always been hot.
Cut it out of the video.
Yeah, no, I mean, that'll be edited out, don't worry. So I've got a set of steps that I think are really useful for us as we read these cases in the book this semester. And if you had me in the evidence class, you know that I like outlines or checklists for students because it kind of keeps them in the pocket of finding most of what I think is important in anything that I ask you to do. And if you look at these 7 steps, they become nice beginning points from which to drive our conversations about the cases. Because really all we're going to do this semester are read cases and talk about them. And talk about their application in the abstract and using the discussion problems at the end of our chapters. That's what we're going to do, and we're just going to do it over and over and over again over the course of the semester. So these are the things that I think are very helpful that I'm probably going to ask you almost every single time we do a case in a year. Who were the parties? Who brought the lawsuit? Where are we when we made it to the litigation? The history of the litigation is important, both from the ability to read the case, but also to understand what's happening in the world sociologically, psychologically, and economically that might be driving these particular, the decision of the justices, because these cases never exist in a non-political vacuum. There's always something else going on in the United States that is impacting to some degree what the court is doing, whether the court is ahead of the issues of the day or behind the issues of the day. There's always an issue that's underneath the surface. There's always an inherent value judgment that is being made in all of these Supreme Court cases. So I want to know the parties and the postures. That's helpful to us in our discussion. And then the facts of the case. In Fourth Amendment cases, a really insignificant fact can become significant because the court chooses to make it significant. Because they will tie a fact or insignificant fact to a decision point of how the law is going to be interpreted. So particularly in the Fourth Amendment cases, we have to be really comfortable with the facts of the cases. We need to know, was it hot pursuit? Were they following someone? What had they actually seen or heard or smelt or done before the decision to enter, to search, was made? Because that's what happens after the fact, held up to the standpoint of the law. So knowing the facts are important. I also think that knowing the facts, not as they apply to the decision in the case, but as they apply to the litigants who were involved, can be very helpful for us because it makes the cases come alive in a way that they do not otherwise come alive. And I understand that telling you that is like almost in direct opposition to what you were told in the first year of law school, which is the individual status of the litigants really doesn't matter, that it's not important. All I can tell you as someone who's practiced law for a quarter of a century is that that thing that you are told in the first year of law school is a complete lie. It is a lie that is told to you to try to get you to learn to think logically as opposed to emotionally. And what I'm trying to do now in this upper level class is to get you to bring logical reasoning and emotional reasoning together, reintroduce them to each other, let them hang out in the car while I watch with a shotgun, and get to know one another again, so that your emotional capacity to reason can inform your logical reasoning. It's time for them to get back together. You know, they've been separate, they've been doing their own thing, dating other people, but ultimately you have to combine your ability to reason emotionally with your ability to reason logically if you're going to successfully practice law. And this is a safe environment to do that in. So we're going to look at those facts. We're going to identify with specificity the issue or issues that the court is addressing. And we need to pay particular attention because sometimes one issue will be brought before the court and the court will decide it in a completely different category. But they don't say that they're doing that, so we have to read the opinion with a degree of clarity to see that happen, right? And then we have to analyze the holding. The holding of the court is not always the opinion of the court. I'll say that again. The holding of the court is not always the opinion of the court. So we need to pay attention to what the votes were. Was it 5-4? Was it 6-3? Was it 4-4-1? Was it, 3-3-4? Okay, it's not possible. 3-3-3, yeah, that can't be that either. 4-3-2, there, that one works. How close is it? Is there a swing vote and why? What were the factors that moved the swing vote? These are the sorts of issues that are problematic for us, and we want to pay attention to them. We also want to read dicta or concurring opinions when I provide them. Now you'll notice in the book the cases are edited. They're edited relatively heavily. I've taken out a lot of the dissenting opinions, and I've taken out portions of some concurring opinions and some majority opinions. That's done primarily to save space and to keep you from drowning in the reading. If you had to read these cases in an unedited format, they're almost twice as large from a book size as they are in their edited format. That also means, though, that I have, by those decisions, hidden certain things from you. I might have excluded a dissenting opinion that later becomes the majority opinion, and I did that on purpose to you. You should feel free, if you get a case that confuses you, or if you get a case that you're like, I'm not sure what's going on here, go pull the thing up in its unedited format. Read it and compare it. See if you can see what I hid from you, and maybe posit why. Because this is a game, right? This is a game that we're playing. It's all of you against me. and I am trying to manipulate you to force you to learn. That means that I have hidden some information from you under the rubric of it's too much information, but also to kind of screw with you and to see who figures it out and who doesn't. It's really interesting. The people who, when they have questions, go and read the unvarnished opinion of the case, bring something back to the classroom from a discussion perspective that doesn't always arise otherwise. So you guys this semester will or you won't. It will be fascinating to me to see if you do, and if you do, who does. If we don't, it'll go a little faster, but it'll be a little less deep. We want to know who won, but often who won the case is the least important piece of it. It's the least important piece because we're extracting standards and rules from it. And quite often the dissenting and the concurring opinion are the most important ones that we see. All right, let's, bless you. Let's pull up. Come on, there we go. By the way, guys, I trained to standard, not to time. So if we get done with the 2 exclusionary rule cases that I've talked about today, before 11:55, I'll let you go. I'm not going to stand up here and vomit verbal diarrhea for 5 minutes just to make certain that the 11:55 minute is met to a T. Now before, those of you who wonder if anal retentive is hyphenated, and if so, whether both the A and the R and capitalized, before you start to worry about the number of minutes that you have for class from a satisfy the graduation requirement perspective, the ABA rules allow me to teach this in a blended fashion. And over the course of this semester, I will put up various lectures on our Blackboard site. Those lectures are considered separate and additional classroom time. So theoretically, I could let us out of class almost every day this semester at 11, and we would be fine from an ABA time perspective. If you feel like you're not getting enough time in class, if you ever feel like I've let you out too early too often, just let me know and I'll be happy to stand here and talk to you until 11:55 every day. You laugh. Quite often there's a person who feels like, I'm not getting my money's worth. You're not going to have that problem with me.